Sunday, we were gonna meet the bus
Hi, Victoria.
over on the other side of the interstate at that truck stop.
In Tuscola.
Tuscola, yeah, cause he is gonna get on the bus with him, so I don't have to go to Danville and drop him off, because he's gonna spend the night and get on the bus with
Hi,
people in
Victoria.
Danville. And so, last year we met
And you?
at the soda.
Would you guys like
Let's just be
this?
here.
You want two?
And so, we're
Oh,
gonna be
yeah.
here, I don't know what time yet.
Taco Bell.
But anyway, we'll come ahead of that and maybe pizza or whatever. And then he's gonna ride on to
Who is that,
Danville
a skinny woman?
with,
Thank you.
Mhm.
right, but I'll take this.
It helps. It's got my like sections, so if nothing else, it's helpful to follow along. Mm-hmm. Yes. There you go. All right. Sure. Thank you. All right, so the first week, are we good, Brian? Okay. The first week, we talked about how nobody lives off of proof, but instead of evidence that points towards the faith that they have. And then so we talked about how the evidence, we talked about two different kinds of evidence so far. We've talked about how the evidence of creation points us towards our faith in Jesus and in God. And then Brian last week talked about how faith in the testimonies and the historicity of Jesus points us towards our faith in him. And so today we're going to talk about how the evidence of morality points us towards a faith in God and just our faith in general. So the main idea of what we're going to talk about today is the existence of morality within our world, and that being a piece of evidence that points us towards our faith. So you guys have if in the notes you have the different, I'm going to just call them chapter sections. So the first one will be two terms that we're going to be talking a lot about tonight, which is objective and subjective morality. So we'll talk about that more. We're going to talk about how, as Christians, we believe in objective morality and how subjective morality, when practiced, is a flawed system to live on. And then we're going to talk about the source of our morality. So that'll be where we talk more about how it applies to God. And then we're going to see what we can do with this information, because I don't want to just say information, but a little application of what we can do with it. And then the last thing I'm going to do is talk about, on the back of your paper, I've got a list of pushback questions that people would have to this discussion, and we're going to talk about those. So, first of all, let's talk about objective and subjective morality. Objective morality is when the morality structure of, and our situation of when our morality is set by a third-party, authoritative, objective being or structure that decides what is moral and what isn't moral. At a subjective, and objective is what we as Christians believe in. Subjective morality is when you have morality that's based on specific groups of individual people. So people groups or cultures or nations have their own subsections of what is moral and what is immoral. And it can go all the way down to, it can go from large nations to two people that, a household has their own set of what is right and wrong. This, we're going to talk about later, is, I think, not how things are. And when practiced, I think it kind of falls in on itself. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So if you want an example of this, one thing that you can kind of apply this to is the principle of I think that chocolate ice cream is the best kind of ice cream. And that would be a subjective opinion, because some people think vanilla is better, some people think whatever is better. So the opinion that chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream is a subjective opinion. And the same way, if somebody steals something, that would be something that, depending on how we fall after this discussion, is either all the time wrong or some of the time wrong. So, for example, when somebody murders another person out of hatred or jealousy, that murder, we usually tend to say that kind of murder out of hatred and jealousy is wrong all of the time. If it's done here in America, it's always wrong. If it's done in some uncontacted tribe that doesn't have our culture, we still think that murder out of hatred and out of jealousy is still objectively wrong. So that would be an example of objective morality. Objective morality would say that no matter where or in what culture, no matter the time or the situation, murder out of jealousy and hatred is immoral. It doesn't matter the situation, that is immoral, an immoral thing to do, and that is towards another person. And subjective morality would say that it's wrong in our culture to murder out of hatred and out of jealousy and selfish ambition, but in other cultures it might be fine. It just depends what culture you're in. So I think, we're going to talk about, I think that that's not the world we live in. We think that there are certain things which are always bad. And for that to happen, there has to be an objective authority to say that, or else it falls in on itself without something to back it up, something objective to back up that idea of morality. Also an example, one that hits a little closer to home, is slavery, like we had it in the American South, morally wrong at all times and in all circumstances. We as a culture has generally declared that form of slavery is morally wrong no matter when and how it's practiced. When it's done like we did it in the American South, we generally, as a culture, have declared that to be immoral. So the question is, that we're going to try and answer today is morality based on individuals and cultures, or is there a universal standard which defines right and wrong? So that's what we're going to be talking about. So that was the first section in your notes. The second section is subjective morality as a flawed system. I just realized I don't have, for the people online, you don't have these notes, and I'm sorry about that. But part 2, subjective morality as a flawed system. When you talk about this subject, you're typically going to get those who believe in an objective morality system, and usually, especially in our case, that objective power is God. We talk about that's what we believe. Just up front, it's God, right? That is deciding this objective morality structure. And then you'll have other people who come from it with a subjective morality case. And the most common argument for subjective morality is going to come from the fact that we as human beings who evolved from apes developed what we have today as our morality structure based on the fact that monkeys over the years observe that when I do something that benefits the pack, my survivability increases. So when the pack does well, I do well. That's kind of the general atheistic idea of, it's the one you're going to find the most of how we got our morality structure as human beings. So that's more so in this section where I'm going to be addressing. So after millions of years of this idea being realized and practiced by evolving animals, humans just begin to formulate these patterns. So morality is no more than patterns of recognizing that when the pack does well, I do well. That's kind of the atheistic idea of of how we as human beings have morality today, outside of the objective morality system. I want to be fair in saying that I don't think that this is a ridiculous theory. If you don't believe in God, I think it's a very rational thing to assume that this is kind of how that goes. So I don't want to discredit that claim. If you're trying to explain morality without God, it does make sense that you have animals who notice that when the pack thrives, I thrive, and then those animals, if you're going down the process of evolution. So I do want to give credit to that at the very least, it's not ridiculous. It's very informed. It's a very informed opinion. And I think what adds to this opinion is that even in certain animals, we can observe some semblance of morality. We see it like there's been observed monkeys who have an idea of like fairness, because they gave, it was a study where they gave a monkey like a berry which tastes good, and then they gave another monkey like something like a piece of bread or something that doesn't taste as good, and they went back and forth. And then so when one monkey observed that the other one got a berry and he got bread, there was signs of like wrongdoing, because he had an idea of fairness. So that was kind of like an example of a very primitive but some sense of what we might consider morality. Well, we also see it in things like an elephant. They've observed elephants that mourn the losses of other elephants has some semblance of something moral. And then lastly, in dogs, we see in dogs like guilt sometimes. When they do something they know they shouldn't do, there's signs of guilt in some dogs. So all that to say, in certain animals, there is some sense of morality structure even within animals. So that paired with the possibility of the evolution of monkeys, and when the pack does well, I do well, we don't necessarily have to, our goal is not to say that only humans have morality. Our goal now is to say what makes our morality different from that of the animals, because there is something there. So when you're facing that question of what happens with evolution and with animals having some sense of morality, what we see is that this does explain. It explains how we have a sense of morality, but it doesn't explain how we have any bit of objective morality. So the idea that monkeys evolved because pack does well, I do well, that explains how we may have gotten morality, but it doesn't explain how we have objective morality. And I think what I'm getting at here eventually is that we do have objective morality. So I don't want you to be satisfied with just explaining how we as possibly evolved creatures would have morality. I want you to be able to comprehend how we have objective more. We're looking higher than subjective reality. We're looking towards objective morality as the system that we are in. So let's talk, this is very interesting. This part is very interesting to me. So let's talk about the world of subjective and evolved morality as a way to get into this discussion. So, again, I say this a lot. I've said this a lot, but, assuming that we're coming from the worldview where we have our morality based on monkeys, noticing that the pack does well. One of my favorite movies is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And in this movie, I don't know if anyone gets this reference, but in this movie there's a quote they break a stick and you say, "Ape alone weak," and then they get a bundle of sticks and you try and break a bundle of sticks. It's harder to break ape together strong. If that illustrates my point, it's one of my favorite movies. That's why I put it in there. Helps illustrate my point, but now with the idea of monkeys evolving into humans, we get the implication that if we would have evolved from any different animal than monkeys, our morality structure would have been different. And this is kind of the point that tears down the subjective moral compass for me. So take for example the praying mantis. When I was a kid, I was told that the female praying mantis bites off the head of its male partner after they mate. After they mated with it, they bite off the head so that the male praying mantis won't eat the baby praying mantis. And so taking the evolved principle, these mantises don't have the conception of when the pack does well, I do well. It's not how they operate. When the pack does well, they actually kind of don't do well because the pack eats their children. So when you take the idea that we have evolved from pack do well, I do well, you get the implication that if we had evolved from anything other than monkeys, our morality, our subjective idea of morality could be different. So if we had instead evolved from praying mantises instead of monkeys, it would be very normal for us to normalize killing the partner after having sex with them, and that would be the morally right thing to do, based on the implications of if you believe the worldview of Pack does well, I do well, that coming from that evolution. All it would take is a slightly different path of evolution to completely change your moral structure. And so now I'm gonna take this to a very more real and serious example. So if changing our morality is as simple as making changes to the process of human evolution, let's explore a theoretical world where the Nazis won World War II. Because the Nazis' goal was to impact evolution. They wanted to impact evolution through eugenics. They wanted the Aryan race to be the master race. They thought that the Jews and African American, or just Africans, were inferior, and they wanted to remove that from the gene pool. They wanted to, in their perfect world, affect the evolutionary process of humans through removing certain parts through eugenics. They also wanted to change humans' conception of authority, of their authority structure. They wanted, in their perfect world, they would have had their Führer be, different. We would look at authority differently through the evolutionary process of their perfect world, right? Now, if the Nazi Party had defeated its enemies and became the new world order, they would have enforced their ideas over all of the people. And in that perfect world, they would have changed the evolutionary narrative to say that it's good to eliminate black people and Jewish people because they're a stain on humanity and the cause of all of our problems. That's what the Nazis would have said. And they would have changed how they wouldn't, we like democracy. They would not have liked that. And so, based on this system of subjective morality, a system that is produced by evolution and based on the culture it is in, to do these things, so to have these, if the Nazi Party had won and if they had done what they wanted to, and they had changed the evolutionary pattern, then the idea that we should eliminate people that aren't like us and that we should, have a different authority structure would have been the morally right thing to do. In the same way, if we had evolved differently from monkeys to praying mantises, our morality structure would have looked wildly different in a way that we would disagree with now. Same way, if the Nazi Party from history had achieved what they wanted and it was as simple as them winning the war and changing the evolutionary narrative, our morality structure would have allowed for the elimination of people that don't look like us, image bearers that don't look like us. And I would say that's bad, right? And that's why I think when you have this kind of subjective morality, any form of morality becomes meaningless because it's so incredibly subject to change. If it's as easy as changing one process in the very large timeline of human evolution, if it's as easy as changing a few things to completely and wildly change your morality structure, that morality structure really does not mean anything. And that's on like a large time evolutionary scale, but that can even be made culturally and socially and politically. It doesn't have to be on that scale. It goes on any scale that you have cultures with different ideas on how things should be. And so again, that morality structure that's based on subjectivity, based on change, means it becomes more meaningless the more it's able to change. And so based on this information, you're going to find some people who will agree that subjective morality is a flawed system. And based on that, they'll believe that their actions don't necessarily have moral consequences. You'll have people who, I would call these just like really honest people. Like the only honest way to live in a subjective morality world is to say that your actions don't have moral consequences because moral consequences don't matter because they are just based on whoever you talk to. It could be different for you, could be different for me. So you have those kinds of people who react to this information. The other kind of people, I would say, is us, where we see that this system of subjective morality is flawed. And so the alternative, the world that we want to live, the world that I think we do live in, is one of objective morality, where right is right and wrong is wrong, where there's actual a third party beyond ourselves system to dictate this morality. It's objective. It's not subject to change. And so that, to me, if I'm thinking biblical principle-wise, you have hot and you have cold. The churches in Revelation, we talked about this. I preached on this not too long ago. You have, Jesus wants us to either be hot or cold. What I have a problem with is those who are lukewarm. Those who will say that we live in a world of subjective morality, and yet they still hold on to facts of right and wrong. So obviously I would want people to lean more towards objective morality. But I still think that going the opposite way, again, hot or cold, if objective morality is hot and then the knowledge that subjective morality is wrong and morals are meaningless, I want you to, either one. Obviously I want you to go to the objective side. But when you're sitting in the middle, that's where you shouldn't be. That's really, it grinds my gears almost. So don't be the person who claims subjective morality but also holds to the truth. So don't be the person who claims to live their own truth but gets upset, gets mad at somebody who disagrees with their truth because you believe that my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth. So in that system, you can't claim subjective morality and then get mad at the decisions that other people make, no matter how it affects you or anybody else. Don't do that. That's a lukewarm, on the scale of morality, objective, subjective morality. That's a lukewarm person. You're claiming one thing, but completely disregarding it when it's convenient to you. And likewise, this is a little bit more harsh, but I really do mean it. Don't claim that there can't be objective morality, but get upset when somebody rapes or murders or steals from somebody. Because you either believe in objective right or wrong, or you believe in complete subjectivity. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have, you can't have nothing, there's no objective standard while saying that rape and murder and theft is wrong because you have nothing to claim to back that up. Don't be that person. Be hot, be cold, don't be lukewarm. Just don't do it. Obviously, I want to make the case, be hot. Don't be cold, definitely don't be lukewarm, be hot. Be objective, believe in that. And I think what I'm trying to get at also is that, I want you to agree, we don't live in the subjective world that they claim. They don't even believe that. The lukewarm people don't even believe that. They claim that it's a subjective world because it's convenient to them to live how they want to live. But by practicing the disdain for murder, for rape, and for theft, they're practicing, though they don't want to admit it, objective morality. In the same way that if I were to go and kick a baby, everyone should frown at that because that's the world we live in. I think if you don't get upset when somebody kicks a baby, there's we can agree that it's not a product of the world. That's a product of there's something wrong with you if you don't think that. So all that to say is we live in the objective. I believe we live in the objective world, whether you like it or not, whether you want to claim it or not, whether you want to act like it or not. You have a sense of justice when a man kicks a baby because that's wrong, because that's the world we live in. There's no situation where anybody who is mentally right would say that is, that's okay. That's objectively wrong. And so now we're going on to the source of our objective morality. So now we want to talk about, I've talked about don't be cold, definitely don't be lukewarm. But now I'm going to make the case that if we want to live in a world where there's objective morality, if you're convinced by my previous case, I now want you to think that God is that objective position. He's that objective authority. So there's certain aspects, and I'm borrowing this, again, I used this last week. This is a guy named Dr. Jonathan Lionheart. He was a professor that I had at Lincoln. But in this book, he talks about this as well, and he also talks about the creation. It's called The Journey of God by J.D. Lionheart. I very much recommend it, but that's where I'm getting this section. So he identifies certain aspects of this objective morality that it must be. And I think these must be statements about objective morality if we're going to believe in that. That's the evidence that points us towards our faith. So the first one being that morality cannot invent goodness. It must be goodness itself. And this is kind of the idea of, this goes back to the praying mantis, to the monkeys, to the Nazi argument. It has to be eternal. It can't be invented. If it was invented, then somebody could simply invent a new morality, like the Nazis, like the praying mantis examples. So this morality can't just be, it can't invent what goodness is. It has to be the very essence of goodness. Now we believe, again, this is where I point to God, we believe that God is the essence of goodness. That's what we preach. That's what we believe. God is that objective goodness. And God can't make this goodness. This goodness can't be beyond God. God has to be this goodness, or else this goodness is created and therefore can be changed, can be, a new goodness could be made and overarching that. But we don't believe that that's the case. We believe that goodness is goodness and wrong is wrong. We believe that kicking a baby is wrong and that helping the homeless people is good. That's the world we live in. So that's the first thing. Morality cannot invent goodness. It must be goodness itself, and God is that goodness. There's no other, I think there's no other system beyond God that could fit that puzzle piece, if that makes sense. If the second one, if we have this objective morality, then it points us to eternal Creator beyond what we can comprehend. I think this goes back to the creation argument, because when we're talking about the Big Bang and you reverse the Big Bang and everything goes back to this one point, and because the Big Bang created everything as we know it, including physics and the laws of physics, the thing that started this Big Bang has to be outside of the thing that it created. The creation cannot be what created itself. And so in the same way, I think that this objective morality, to be objective, has to be beyond our comprehension. It has to be beyond what we conceptualize. And again, like I said in the creation, I think that is God. God is a being who is outside of what we can conceive as reality. He's outside of our laws of physics in our universe. And only He can explain how this morality, which is beyond ourselves, came to be. So it has to be God that is behind this grand morality for it to be objective. If it were within our universe, it would be created, because the universe is a created thing. Everyone agrees with that. It had a starting point to say. So if it had a starting point, then it has to be created. And if it's created, something new can be created to replace it. So it has to be beyond ourselves, and therefore God. God is beyond ourselves. The third one is that this moral law has to be separated from natural law, based on the fact that you can defy it. You can defy the laws of gravity, you cannot defy the laws of gravity. You can jump, but you're going to come back down. It's a law, it's a set thing that is. But you can do something that's immoral. So I'm not saying this very well. You can break a natural law. You cannot, I said that wrong again. You cannot break a natural law. You can break the morality. You can do something immoral. You cannot defy gravity. And based on that, I think that, again, points towards God. You see, I think that points us towards God. So the fourth one after that, because morality is based on a concept, concepts are not physical. They are things that require minds to process. A concept is nothing without a mind to process that concept. A rock is a thing. A concept, like an idea, is not something that is physical. It's something that you need a mind to process. And likewise, morality being something that's not physical, it's relational, it has to come from a mind to be something that is objective and exists. It has to come from a mind. It can't be something it can't be like written on a thing, on a stone tablet floating in space, because that would be a thing. That would be morality that's created. It's not possible. Morality being an idea, a concept, has to come from a mind. Does that make sense? Yes, no? Okay. So it can't be physical. It has to, because morality is a concept, it's not a physical thing, it has to come from a mind. And that mind, again, paired with the other ones, has to be outside of reality. It has to be sat outside of our conception. Therefore, God is not just like a force. He's not the force. He's like a personality. He's a being. He is a mind. He processes. He knows. He is beyond physical. God would have to be this mind that is forming this idea of morality, of objective morality. And lastly, I think this is the fifth and final one. Moral law it's unlike a physical law in the sense that it's personal. When I throw a rock at somebody, I've done something immoral, but the rock has not done something immoral. So moral law requires personality. It's not something that a rock can do to a rock. It's something that a person has to do with a person. It involves and requires personality for morality to even be relevant to the conversation. And as we know, again, I think this points to God. If we're saying there has to be an objective sense of right and wrong, it has to come from a personality. It can't come from a thing, because things don't care about feelings because they don't have feelings. But we know God feels things. He has love, and he has anger, and he has hatred. He hates sin. He hates evil. He loves his creation. It has to be from a personality, because it is at its very nature, at its very core, personal. That is morality. So yeah, those are the 5 things. Yes. So that's the source of objective morality. I think that if you're going to agree in objective morality, which I think we live in that world, I think we live in the objective world. So if we do live in an objective world, I think it has to be from God. That's the point of what I just made. And so the next thing we're going to go into is application. At the very least, and we kind of talked about this last week, or the first week rather, last time I talked. I don't think that we should use, this is an apologetics class, I don't think we should use apologetics to argue somebody into the faith. Because if somebody's faith is built on a logical argument, all it takes is a better worded, more logical argument to destroy their entire faith. That's no way to build a faith. What I think apologetics can do for us, and what I recommend, is that it can build common ground. In a world that thinks we're just kind of cuckoo crazy people, we make these presentations and we say what we're believing is not necessarily ridiculous. It actually kind of makes sense. And so I think this is the same thing. Use the fact that at the very least, if you don't even agree that we live in an objectively moral world, I think nobody can deny that they want to live in an objectively moral world. We want to live in a world, at the very least, if you don't want to agree with it, you want to live in a world where stealing from me, if I'm an atheist, I would like it to be objectively wrong to steal from me because I don't want people to steal from me. I would like it to be objectively wrong for people not to kill me because I don't want to die. And the same with rape and with any other evil, the worst thing you can think of, whatever it is, I don't want those things to happen to me. So at the very least, I want it to be an objective world, because otherwise, anyone can do whatever they want to me, and I really have no case to say that that was unjust, that was wrong. And so at the very least, objective Christian morality is good. And on that foundation, on the foundation that I think the universe points towards objective morality, but at the very least that you would want to live in that world, use that as a foundation to then talk about Jesus. Because a logical argument, faith built on a logical argument can fail with a different logical argument, but a faith built on Jesus Christ cannot fall. And so we use this as common ground to stand on. I think before, the debate field is a little shaky, the evangelistic field is a little shaky because they think we're loony. But if you use this ground to stand on, you have firm foundation to stand on to tell them about Jesus and to introduce them to Jesus. Because when you bring in Jesus, Jesus does what Jesus does, and he's beautiful. I don't need to explain that to you guys. Jesus will do what he does. And so use this, like I said with creation, like I would recommend with the historicity of Jesus. Use this as a foundation for common ground to then go on and tell them about Jesus. But also do, as I said first week, also use it as a way to build your faith. Take comfort in the fact that we do live in an objective world, and the fact that we do points us towards a beautiful and good God who is creating that standard for us. He's creating order for us. It's because of God that I can stand strong in saying people shouldn't kill me or steal from me, because that's what God wants. He doesn't want a world where people do that. And so he has, to do that, he has given us this system of objective morality. So take faith in that, if nothing else. And that's all before the pushback. So what I'm going to do now is answer questions, and then after that, we're going to bring up some I used AI. I have AI like critique my argument, and so I'm going to bring up questions from what a theoretical person might say. So, but before I do that, does you guys have any questions? And Facebook as well, or YouTube or whatever.
If you do, raise your hand and I'll give you a mic.
Was there anything that didn't make sense that needs clarifying?
Is it moral to have a mustache?
I think not only is it morally acceptable, but it might be a moral positive. Because it looks good. Makes people happy. I'm serving with this mustache.
You know, kind of the way you pitted objectivity.
Restart.
Thank you. The way you pitted objectivity against subjectivity, from your standpoint, it seems like there's no argument or reason or no use, no place for subjectivity to enter the picture.
It's a very bold claim, and one that would like infuriate, I think, an atheist, because again, consider like if you're playing a board game, consider you're playing at Monopoly, and Monopoly has a rule book, and it's based on that rule book that you can play Monopoly. And admittedly, it's not a perfect example because there are some rules that you can tinker with Monopoly. But imagine you're playing Monopoly and everyone just starts making up their own rules as they go, and they say, I'm actually just going to take all of your money because I pulled this imaginary card, and you just keep making rules. The game of Monopoly falls apart. The game is pointless. You're no longer playing a game of Monopoly. There has to be a set of rules that informs the functionality of the game, or else the game means nothing. So in the same way, I think when you're saying that there's no standard for right and for wrong, the whole idea of right and wrong no longer matters, because you can't, everyone can just make up their own idea of right and wrong, and then at that point there is no right or wrong. It's just whatever I think, whatever my truth is what I operate by. But again, I don't think we live in that. I think we like to say we live in that because it allows you to do whatever you want when it's convenient for you. But when it comes to you, that's when you say, no, that's wrong, you can't do that. So I think it's something that we don't want to face it because it allows us to do what we want to do when it's convenient for us. But again, when it comes to you, all of a sudden we like right and wrong. I think those are the lukewarm people. I think that's the most dishonest way to approach morality. If you're going to approach it at all, don't make bold claims and then only, and then flake out on it when it's convenient. Anything else?
I'll go check Facebook real quick, but there wasn't anything.
Okay. Anything else need clarification, or? It's fine if not, because we still have some questions to answer via a theoretical person.
Well, does God have any peers?
Does God have any peers?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
Does he have anybody equal to him?
I don't think so.
There are other gods out there that
I don't believe so.
run other worlds.
I think with that implication, that would introduce subjectivity to the equation. So I think for this to function, I think it can't be the case. At least equals. I do believe there's spiritual beings under him, but I don't think there's any equals or graters. And the very foundation of objective morality rests on that, I think.
I never thought about that before
I mean, honestly, I didn't think about it till you said it, but it's a good thought train. Yeah. Anything, Brian?
No.
Okay. Well, so one of the pushbacks that a theoretical person might say if you brought this up is that there's an idea that moral facts can exist as a part of reality itself, similar to like a law of physics or a mathematical truth. But the thing with that, and we've kind of touched on this before, but something additional is that when it comes to the laws of physics, you can test them. You know, the law of physics that gravity takes control of that book, that's something that I can test. Likewise, it brought up mathematical truths. I can prove that 1 and 1 make 2 because 1, 2. That's something that you can prove. But if you can tell me where it's set in stone that there is a physical, but beyond, it doesn't. I can't even logically make sense of that. There's something physically that's determining this, and yet it would have to be created. So I don't see how that could be possible. That moral facts could exist as a part of reality itself if it was, beyond, if it was outside of anything other than God. I can't see how that, you'd have to show me the money on that one. There's no way. Yeah, and in the same way, the moral laws are like I talked about. It's not physical. Like you can test that a book falls. You cannot test something that is immoral. It has to come from something outside of what we have. And in this, if it exists as a part, it cannot exist as a part of reality itself because it has to come outside of reality to be something that is objective, or else it's just subjective and then can be created. A new one can be created over that, if that makes sense. Does that answer? You guys weren't the ones that asked that question, but you can see the question in your notes. Does that kind of answer that question?
I don't even understand the question.
So the question is saying, so moral facts exist as a part of reality itself. So it's kind of, and I agree. I don't think it makes sense. So I think there's a bit of reason to the conclusion you're coming to. But it is. The question is asked in the notes because it is a common theory that is put up. So this is something you might find if you engage this with an atheist. But what this is saying is that there is a moral fact in the same way that we have a law of physics or we have mathematical equations, that there's somehow a moral fact just in the nature of the universe. But you can test that. You can test 1 + 1. You cannot test morality. There's no way to it makes me feel bad. There's no way to test that. But this is and again, you have a very confused face. I agree. This is an argument that you're going to find, a common argument that you might find if you engage this. I agree.
Well, that argument falls apart
Yeah.
because for the atheists, they don't believe in an absolute.
Yeah.
So for us, we don't understand that standpoint because we believe in the absolute truth of God,
Yeah.
whereas they don't.
Right.
And if you don't have that as a foundation, then yeah, there's all kinds of cracks in that theory.
I mean, for a lot of people, faith will make them sleep uneasy at night. I think this is one where faith might make you sleep easy at night.
Why couldn't, so if moral facts exist as part of reality itself, why can't you just look at the negatives that come from murder or, some immoral act? You say, well, you can't prove that, it's not like 1 + 1 is 2. But what about the effect that it had on the family that has to deal with the murder of somebody?
I would say that would be their argument for this, is that you can measure it by the negative impact it had on the people around them. But I would say at the same time, you still can't claim the subjective, you can't claim that that's you can't claim that that's the objective truth. Yeah, I don't.
I just wonder why not.
Right. Yeah. I think if we're talking subjectivity, you don't have to you don't logically have to feel empathy for that person whose family member died, there's no law saying that you have to do that in the same way that there's a law saying that when I dropped that book, it fell. There's no law saying that any reaction on your part has to take place empathetically towards the person who lost the life. And I think because it's personal, because it's relational, it has to be, for morality to exist, there has to be like, at some level, a sense of wrongdoing, and therefore like empathy towards that wrongdoing. There's nothing to say that I have to feel that way towards them in a subjective world. Objectively, we do feel wrong for them because we don't live in a subjective world. Does that kind of make sense?
Well, it goes back to that subjective doesn't have a foundation.
Yeah.
There's nothing to build it on. It's shifting.
Yeah.
It's whatever I think of the moment.
Right. Yeah. And so that's a great point. In the same way, that saying that murder and measuring that murder as being wrong, if subject to change, if it's based on the culture, another culture could come in and say, we think that's perfectly fine. We think they're better off. And based on the subjective culture, you can't say, well, that's not true, because it's only not true for you personally. It's not true for them. And then everything falls apart. But we have objective morality that says you shouldn't have murdered that guy, that family's father. We live in that world. We all feel the sense of there needs to be justice, and that's not how things should be. So, yeah. It's not, again, I suppose when you put it that way, it's not the most ridiculous argument, but it still crumbles under the crumbling foundation of subjective morality. So the second question, and I think this one's actually quite interesting. It's very good for Christians to consider. I think it informs a lot. If good is whatever God commands, what if God commands cruelty? Would that be then good? And I think this is a good thing for Christians to face. If goodness and morality is what God deems it to be, what if God commands people to do something immoral? Does that mean that God is immoral and therefore morality crumbles in on itself? And that's a great point. If God was the objective standard for morality, and then God went behind his own back and did that, yes, that would mean that morality means nothing. However, God is not, that's not God. God is not going to command that. He's not going to contradict himself. If what we believe about God is true, we don't have to worry about it, because it's so important that God is that objective truth, because God is, as a being, objective. Like, he's not going to contradict himself. There's nothing subjective within him that would counter himself. That argument only matters if God would do that, but God won't do that, and that's why it works. Now, if God ever commanded cruelty, I think there would be a good claim to say that God is not worth worshiping, and that his morality is not worth following. But until he does that, you ain't got to worry about it. And he's not going to do that, because he is God.
It also makes the case for faith.
Right. Yeah, it makes the case for faith, yeah. And then, so the next question, if God commands what is already good, then goodness exists outside of God, and therefore morality does not come from God. So that's kind of saying either God is morality or he created morality. So they're saying God, so the question is, does morality, is what is good already like a thing that exists, and then God is coming in and enforcing that goodness, or is he the very embodiment of goodness? So if God was the embodiment of goodness, then that goodness stays non-created. But if it's something that God is stepping into, it's already a system, then that means that goodness is beyond God, and then that goodness, that's not even possible, because there's nothing beyond God. It would have to be something beyond God.
Somebody has to really want to not believe in God to even ask that question.
Yeah, right. And so I wouldn't even engage that question necessarily, because we're not claiming that God commands what is already good. That's not even what we're saying. So if somebody claims that God is commanding what is already a sense of goodness, don't even engage with it, because we don't even believe that. So why talk about it? Yeah, and that's a very important distinction. And just as a Christian, know that goodness is not something that God enforces, but goodness is God. He is the very embodiment. Like the Spirit, it comes from him. It pours through him. It's not something that he is stepping into. Let that build your theology. Don't engage that argument if somebody brings it, because we don't even care. We don't believe that. Next question. Even atheists, I do like this question, even atheists can recognize right and wrong. They can love others and live ethically. This would imply that moral reasoning can be accessed without divine revelation. So you have people, like when you're talking about why does good things happen to bad people, that's a different argument, but that comes out of a position of, this is a person who didn't believe in Jesus, but he lived a very good life. And he did that without considering it from God, from interacting with God. He had this good moral living without God. And what I would say from that is that I think that informs us very well as being people who are made in the image of God. Obviously, you have the reason everyone's made in the image of God, but not everyone lives good lives, relatively speaking. No one lives a good life except for Jesus. That's the point that Christians make for the prior argument. But I just lost my train of thought. I went on a rail there. So, yeah, because we're made in the image of God, we just as being human beings have that goodness written on our hearts. I think that's something that the Bible talks a lot about. Is like Paul talks about the unseen nature of God, and it's something that exists. It's something that we were created with, and the fall and then sin and the fall, it corrupts that, and that's why we have people who live non-good lives. But that image bearing still has its form. You can't get rid of that because it is like what we were created with. It's the same kind of argument for if you believe that morality comes from evolution of monkeys. That moral structure and that argument is written into their DNA, their genetics. It's a part of how they've evolved. It's that same concept, not what's happening. What's happening is that goodness, being made in the image of God, goodness is written in our very DNA. It's in our genetics. It's a part of us. It's inseparable from us. That shadow of what goodness was, because it's a very partial picture of it because of sin and because of the fall, and that's the whole Christian narrative. That's a whole different conversation if you want to get into that. But there is still that lingering goodness just by the nature of being made in the image of God, being created by God. And then the last question, if God were the source of morality, then we could expect more agreement about what is right and wrong, but instead we have different claims about morality from different cultures and religions. I think this is a very good thing. Again, a lot of these are good for Christians to consider. They're trying to bring us down, but I think it's just, if you have a good sense of these, you're going to have a good Christian life. So why is it that if morality is objective, why is it that I think one thing is morally right and another guy thinks something is morally right? At the end of the day, one of us is right, one of us is wrong, or both of us are wrong, and we have like a fractured picture. For objective morality to exist, there has to be one standard. So that means when somebody lives in that world and they deviate from that, they're just wrong. Like you can be wrong and still think you're doing the right thing. And the reason that happens, it shouldn't be the way that it is. It should be we're in the Garden of Eden in a close personal relationship with God, and we, without sin, have the exact representation of God, and we know what is right and wrong. But we live in a broken, fallen world. We live in a world with sin. And that sin and that separation from God is why we don't know. It's that sin and separation from God is why I think one thing is right and another guy thinks another thing is right. Because this world is not as it should be. You're assuming that argument comes from the position that the world is as it should be. The world is not as it should be. Something is wrong. And so that's why even in the objective system, people still get it wrong, because people are always getting everything wrong, and that's why the world kind of sucks right now. So that's all of my theoretical. Thank you to my theoretical person who asked the questions. Before we end, is there anybody else who has any real people questions? Or any clarifications needed? And if not, we have 3 minutes, and that's very good timing, so it's okay.
Begs the question, so if two people believe in God and believe in the Bible, how can they still disagree on something?
So if two people read the Bible and agree or disagree, and they're informed by the same thing, but they come to different conclusions.
One says smoking's okay, one says smoking's not.
I think that's something that I lament a lot, because the problem with that system and the problem with the church and the problem with all of humanity is because humanity is a part of it. Yeah, the interpreters of this information, the Bible, everything that the Bible says is perfect. We believe that it's inerrant, and within context, it means exactly what it means, and that is true. But the problem is that a person's reading it. This person who's reading it and this person's reading it, they come with different conclusions. They're coming with different conclusions because they are flawed people. You can't get around that. That's why you need faith in Jesus. That's why you need the Spirit. You need to walk with the faith and with the Spirit, if we're talking Christian-wise. Yeah. Which is super interesting as far as like church leadership goes, and as far as like individual faith goes, but that's why any culture or person built, any religious system built on a person is not going to last, because it's subjective, right? It's got to have that objective truth to then, even if people are wrong, even if the First Christian Church of Tuscola is wrong about all that we believe, which I don't think we are, for the record. If we are wrong about all the things we believe, whatever is true is still going to happen. It doesn't matter what we decide. We are just doing our best to fit into whatever the objective truth, whatever is happening. We're just trying to fit within that. Even if we're wrong, it's still going to happen. Again, I don't think we're wrong, but or else I wouldn't be up here talking in front of a bunch of people. So yeah. Anything else? I might pray us out. I think that's always a good idea, if nothing else. All right, God, we thank you for morality. We thank you that in this world we have justice and we have right and wrong, because without it, things would be harder, things would be against us, and things wouldn't be fair. So we thank you for that. But it's also in recognizing that morality exists, that we do immoral things. And so we thank you so incredibly much that you have grace. We thank you that you have justified us, that you are sanctifying us. We thank you for your Son who died on the cross for our sins and has washed away that immoral side of us, that the implications of that immoral side. We need you so incredibly much. And so we thank you and we praise you in your Son's name. Amen.